All right, good morning. I'm going to get started. If anyone is confused, I'm Jackie McBride slash Jackie Latham. I just went through a name change, so you'll see a couple different, you'll see my old name and my new name. But either email J Latham or J McBride at Open Space Authority will get you to me, and I'll address that at the end as well. So as people are coming in, I'm going to get started and we'll be monitoring the Q&A and I'll be off camera, but we are here. So let me know in the Q&A if you have any questions along the way. Otherwise, I'll jump on in. Thank you for being here.
Hello and welcome to the Urban Grant Program online webinar for the 2025 program solicitation. This grant program and today's workshop is hosted by the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. For today's workshop, the bulk of the content will be pre-recorded and participants are muted. So please add any comments or questions into the Q&A feature, which we may address during or at the end of the workshop. Feel free to turn on closed captions by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And this webinar is recorded and will be posted on our grants website later this week. There's also a frequently asked questions document with common questions in there now, and that will be updated after this webinar with more information that comes out of questions from today as well. So this is me, the person talking to you. This is Jackie McBride. Hello, I'm the grants program coordinator. Here I am hanging out with some birds, and I will be the person talking through this presentation today. I'm also your main contact for any urban grant program related questions. Monica Nunez is also joining us, and she'll be helping to monitor the Q&A and other technical details of this workshop. So thanks again for joining us. We'll hop into the details now. If you're just joining us, this is the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority's 2025 Urban Grant Program Solicitation Workshop. Our mission here at the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority is to conserve the natural environment, support agriculture, and connect people to nature by protecting open spaces, natural areas, and working farms and ranches for future generations. We acknowledge that the Open Space Authority works within lands that were originally stewarded by the Awaswas, Chochenyo, Mutsun, and Tamian-speaking peoples. Today, we're honored to partner with the Ama Mutsun Tribal Band, Muwekma Ohlone Tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area, and Tamian Nation in our shared work to protect and restore the environment and connect people to the land. The Open Space Authority's jurisdiction includes the cities of Campbell, Milpitas, Morgan Hill, San Jose, and Santa Clara, and the unincorporated areas of the Santa Clara County. Part of our focus is resilience to extreme weather, as in the past decade, our region has experienced direct impacts of more extreme weather patterns. Some examples you may recall include the Coyote Creek flood of 2017 with more than $100 million in damage to the city of San Jose. This flood would have been much worse had Coyote Valley not captured significant storm waters. The CZU and SCU lightning complex wildfires of 2020 burned at unprecedented intensity in the Redwood Forest, and winter's 2023 record rainfall, atmospheric river storms, and regional flooding resulted in crop loss and infrastructure damage. So the lands we protect provide a buffer to extreme weather impacts such as from wildfires, flood, and drought. And at the Open Space Authority, we focus on investing in nature and nature-based solutions as a critical piece of protecting local communities. We also fulfill our mission by permanently protecting and restoring nature as infrastructure lands that provide multiple benefits for people and wildlife. We believe that nature is an irreplaceable life support system for our communities and all who live in Santa Clara Valley. And by caring for nature, nature can provide the important natural resources that we all depend on now and forever. The Authority operates 4 open space preserves that are open to the public 365 days a year and provide over 33 miles of trails for hiking, mountain biking, and horseback riding. We also offer a range of educational experiences throughout the year, including docent-led hikes, stargazing events, wildflower walks, and many other things. And another big focus of our work is connecting people to nature, and our 2 grant programs are direct ways that we do this work. So we have 2 primary grant programs, the Urban Grant Program and the 20% funding program. But you are here today to hear about the Urban Grant Program, which has funded about 74 projects and awarded about $5.6 million to projects that help connect people to nature. We've had approximately 4 or 5 solicitations, and they tend to fall every other to 2 years. And the eligible entities are nonprofits, schools, public agencies, or those through a fiscal sponsor. In the past, we've had 2 solicitation types within the Urban Grant Program, roughly defined as capital and planning for capital and programs. And this 2025 solicitation is for programs only. All of our grants require that the programs or the projects are within our jurisdiction. If you'd like to learn more about the projects we've funded in the past, you can find them on our webpage. We have a grant funded projects page if you look on our website under grants. And you can see here in this picture, the little orange dots are some of the projects that we've funded. Which brings me to our map of our jurisdiction shown here, and this shows our eligible grants area. So your program needs to be within our jurisdiction. It cannot take place in that grayed out area outside of our jurisdiction. And it must primarily serve people living in the eligible grants area, which is shown by the orange diagonal lines, that lighter shaded orange section. This eligible grants area, which you can see at the bottom of the key, is determined by what we consider to be urban areas in our jurisdiction with about 1 mile of give outside of that radius. So your programs may occur in the areas outside of that orange eligible grants area as long as it's within our jurisdiction, but it needs to primarily serve communities in that eligible grants area. So those are those living in urban areas. This is the Urban Grant Program, so it's really important that your communities served by your program are urban-based versus rural. Some information about the funding for this grant. In 2014 and 2020, Measure Q and Measure T respectively were overwhelmingly passed, and they provide the funding for the Urban Grant Program. So Measure Q and Measure T describe the grant program and the expenditure plan. So this outlines the program, including the types of projects, eligible applicants, and that it is a competitive program. And this year, the solicitation is entirely funded by Measure Q funds. The application and awards process for the solicitation is a 2-step process, including a required pre-application before being eligible for a full application. From there, applicants that submitted a complete full application will be considered by our board of directors, who make the final grant award decision in a public meeting. I will discuss some details about the public meeting later in this workshop. Some overview of our solicitation is that our board of directors have allocated $750,000 for this program solicitation, and project awards will be between $30,000 to $75,000 each. We expect roughly 15 to 20 awards to be made, and these are all 2-year-long grants. We require a 25% match for those who are considered to be large organizations. Large organizations are defined by this grant program as those with annual revenues of $10 million or more. If you don't fall under that category, match is not required and it's not expected or scored as part of the application process. So please note that if you do include match in your budget and it's not required by your organization size, but you are awarded a grant, you will be expected to submit match if it is part of your application. We do allow in-kind donations as match, and our guidelines have more details about match on pages 9, 13, and 16. This grant program is reimbursement based and project costs must be within the grant agreement period. No work can begin on this project until the grant contract is signed. So please be aware that your project will likely not start until late spring of 2026 at the earliest. Also, we have increased our indirect costs from 5% in the past to 20%. I'll touch on that in a couple of slides. And we're continuing to use the same online grant software for the solicitation and management of active grants. This year, we're introducing a theme for our program solicitation, which is building a climate strong future for all. This highlights the climate resilience aspect of our grant program that has been in the program and application since its founding. And we're looking for programs that highlight how organizations are connecting their work to climate resilience in their unique way. The pre-application asks that applicants touch on how their project touches on climate resilience in some way, and there is a climate resilience question in the full application that is scored. If you're familiar with past urban grant program solicitations, you'll notice that much of the guidelines are familiar with a few key changes. Some of those to highlight include, like I mentioned, the indirect cost maximum is now 20% of the grant funding. This only applies to nonprofits. This includes costs known as administrative expenses, such as building utilities and equipment, insurance, administrative and communication expenses, and so forth. Appendix E at the end of our guidelines outlines direct and indirect costs. The guidelines include our solicitation theme that I mentioned, building a climate strong future for all, and we've added a glossary term for climate resilience. The scoring has also been updated, which I'll cover in a later slide, and project examples and desired elements have been updated. Otherwise, there are no major changes to grantee contracts, process, or otherwise from past solicitations. How cute is that? It just makes you want to be a pumpkin. Just me? Okay. As mentioned, this is a programs only solicitation. So we think of program projects as things like classes, trainings, curriculum building, special events, program development, and other impactful community services that help connect people living in urban areas to nature. This means that long-lasting built projects are not eligible for this round of funding. We consider long-lasting projects to be capital or planning for capital projects, which includes natural or built construction, restoration, or enhancement that bring nature to urban areas. So those would be considered capital projects and would not be eligible for this program solicitation. So if you're wondering if your project is program or capital, one way to think of programs is that they are people-focused and they will not require permission to make any changes to the environment or buildings. So we often have questions about program versus capital fit. If you're not sure, please reach out to me if you'd like to discuss your project details. You can ask me other questions too, but if you have questions about project fit, eligibility, please feel free to reach out. That's why I'm here. So our guidelines are available on our grant webpage, and this is the main source of details, policies, rules, and so forth for the grant program. We highly recommend that you familiarize yourself with the guidelines as well as the grant agreement template. If you are interested in applying, because we are really unable to make changes and exceptions to our application process as well as the grant agreement contracts. So please be aware of these parameters before you apply. This grant solicitation requires that your project falls in at least one or more of the following categories, being environmental education, environmental stewardship and restoration, parks, trails, and public access, and urban agriculture and food systems. And as I noted in the last slide, this is a programs only solicitation. So it's really likely that maybe environmental education is the primary category for your project, as some of the other categories such as restoration or parks and trails, those often would have a lot of capital project aspects to it. But not saying that those things can't be in your project, but it needs to really be primarily focused on programs. So your project might be focused on something like food systems, but the project would need to really be about education around food systems or events related to urban agriculture, something like that, as opposed to implementing a new garden and building beds or planting native trees and bushes. That's an example. So we really want to highlight that in order to be eligible, your project needs to be a program which primarily serves people as its primary focus and does not have a permanent or long-lasting impact to the land. The eligible applicants are nonprofits, schools and school districts, and public agencies. If your organization does not fall under one of these categories, you may apply with a fiscal sponsor, with the fiscal sponsor being the main applicant. For more information about fiscal sponsors, please see our Intro to Grants virtual open house video on our grants page. You can also look at the fiscal sponsor information in our guidelines on page 4 and Appendix C. And like I mentioned, you can reach out to me directly for more support on fiscal sponsorships. We have updated our scoring, and I'll go through each of these sections that are outlined in our guidelines. But here's the overview. There is a total possible score of 175 points that will be scored by an Open Space Authority staff review team member. Staff reviewers take their role very seriously, and they score each section of the application against the guidelines rubric, which I'll cover over an overview of that in a moment. One piece of advice that applies to our process as well as many other grant programs is that because applications are scored only on the information given in the application that you provide in the application, even if you believe that the Open Space Authority may be super familiar with your work or your organization, you should assume that reviewers might not necessarily be super familiar with your organization. And you really need to make sure to fully answer all the questions and check for clarity and completeness. Along that note, make sure to define acronyms and avoid technical jargon. Here's a draft timeline for this process, and note that dates are subject to change. I'll show another timeline at the end as well. The pre-application opened on May 13th and is due on June 26th at 5 p.m. It closes at 5 p.m. If you're expecting to submit a pre-application, please submit early. And I'll note this again, but you need to click submit. It's a green button. Make sure to click that before 5 p.m. on June 26th. Pre-applications are required. So if you're thinking, you're looking ahead and you're like, oh, full applications aren't due until October, we've got plenty of time. Yes, but you first need to turn in a pre-application. So after the pre-applications are turned in, we will review for eligibility over the summer and get back to applicants by about mid-August at the latest to confirm eligibility status. So those that are eligible for the full application will have at least 8 weeks to complete the full application, and we expect the due date to be October 14th. We expect the Board of Directors to have their special award meeting to be March of 2026, with that date to be determined. And this would mean that most grant agreements will be executed next summer of 2026. A note about our special awards meeting. Our grants are awarded in a public meeting held by our Board of Directors. These are typically longer meetings that involve discussion and questions by our Board of Directors as they're deeply invested in the communities they represent, and they're quite enthusiastic about this grant program. If you're an applicant and your application is recommended by the staff reviewers, it's very likely that your application would be discussed and questions may be asked of the applicant. So we encourage applicants that are either recommended or potentially recommended. Sometimes there's kind of a third category of recommended if funding allows. If your application falls into one of those categories, or otherwise, we do really recommend that you attend the board meeting. You can attend virtually or in person. And I'll be sending out more information such as the time allotment and other details before that meeting occurs. But all of our public meetings are recorded, and you're welcome to listen to archived special board meetings for previous awards or just any board meeting if you'd like to just learn more about how our board meetings go, what they sound like, what the process generally is. If that's something that's unfamiliar to you or the staff that might be attending, I recommend going through that process just to get more comfortable. I'll now walk you through the steps to find the grant materials and more details about the application. So this is a screenshot of our Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority website. So one way to find the grants page is to click on that banner at the top that says Learn More, but eventually that banner will go away. And so if you're not sure how to find it on our website, you would hover over the projects and programs, that top arrow is pointing at it, and then put your mouse over that onto the grant programs. So that will take you to the web page that covers our 2 grant programs. And you'll scroll down to the urban grant program section. Right now it says apply here. Sometimes that language says urban grant program materials, but either way should be kind of obvious, hopefully, that it will take you to get more information about the urban grant program. So this left box shows that. And then on that urban grant program webpage, you'll see all the materials. So this webpage has everything that you would need for the solicitation. It includes links to the guidelines and the grant agreement template, as well as a Word version of the application if you'd like to download that for reference, as well as the link to the online grants portal. You do need to use that online grants portal. That's required for submitting your application. The Word document is just for reference. Sometimes people like to download it. Let's see. You'll also find a budget form link, eligibility, and our district map, a tutorial for our grant management system, resolution templates, many things on here. And then also that FAQ is on here, and we'll be updating that shortly after this workshop. We use a grant management system called WiseHive Engine. You won't really see it be called that on your end, but that is what it's called. It's a fairly simple online system that has our pre-application, full application, as well as any grant management resources that you need if you are awarded a grant. So that includes reimbursements and reporting. And please note that each organization uses just one login for the system. So if your organization has a profile from a previous cycle, whether you were awarded or not, you will need to use that login. If the email address is no longer in use, like that person's no longer at your organization, please reach out and I can update that on the back end. Or if you're not sure, if you think maybe we submitted an application in the past, but I'm not sure, or maybe we have a login, you can just ask me. I'm pretty friendly. I'm happy to help you. And yeah, if you have any trouble getting logged in, please let me know. I've also made a WiseHive tutorial, and this is available on our grants webpage. It shows screenshots and step-by-step instructions for logging in and applying for our grants. Also, I wanted to note that the application questions in WiseHive, in the system that you actually apply, it's pretty small, some of the font. So I do recommend using either the guidelines or that Word version alongside during your application process as a tool. This is an example. So on the left, you can see it says project description, and then please include how your project addresses community climate resilience. It's pretty small help text. So the grant guidelines, it's easier to see that. It's a little bigger, or the Word version, it's the same thing. So that is helpful, but please remember that you do have to use that online grant application system to submit your application. So in that system in WiseHive, this is what it looks like to log in. So you'll either need to log in, reset your password, or create a new login. Those options are all shown here. Then once you're in, you'll be taken to your home page where you'll see your organization profile and then any projects below. So you might have none, you might have 10, whatever applications that you've started, they may be in there. If they were never submitted and they're over 3 years old, they may have been removed if they did not have any information in them. But if they were submitted or they had information in them, you'll be able to see either those drafts or submitted applications in the system. The organization profile, you can see that edit button. If you're new to the system, please go in there and fill out the basic information that's required before you get into your pre-application. So just ask for basic contact information. If you are a returning applicant and you already have an organization profile, I ask that you please go in and edit and make any updates that might be necessary. That's a main way that I contact people in bulk if there's announcements. So if you're going to get project updates about this solicitation moving forward, please update contact fields there. To start a pre-application, you're going to click the Add Another button. That arrow is pointing to that little arrow. So a tip is to have maybe a new project name if you've had former projects with this name, because otherwise when they're all in there, it can get a little confusing which thing you're working on. So if you have a similar program name than in the past, maybe it might be beneficial to add a new creative word in there so you can tell the difference between them more easily, but also for the reviewers, innovation is part of the scoring matrix, so it might help to highlight some of the new and innovative parts of your program if you've applied before. Speaking of tips, the title of your project is really important. This is for our grant program, but for any other grant opportunities as well, because the title is often the first way that reviewers or the board of directors or other decision makers get to know your project. So a pithy title that says something about what your project does without being too long is really helpful. I personally think that many of the best titles are 3 to 6 words long, but that's definitely not a hard and fast rule. There's no rule on that. But yeah, consider what you're trying to say about your project. Please note that if your project name is really long, it may be shortened for presentations or public-facing information, like at our board of directors meetings. So that's something to keep in mind. If it's multiple lines or like a sentence, we might only get to show the first 5 words of that project title. Some other tips. Please answer all the questions. It won't let you move on if it's a required question and you don't have a response in there. There are some character limits. There's one in the pre-application and then more in the full application. There's about a rule of thumb about 1,000 characters is approximately a third of a page and 3,000 characters is approximately 1 page long. Our system does not allow for special formatting, so bold text, bullet points, etc. There's no required documents for the pre-application for the programs unless you have a fiscal sponsor. So here are the pre-application questions. You'll see it's pretty basic, answering some questions about what kind of organization, some eligibility things about park maintenance or previously allocated funds, information about matching funds, and then there's the project description. That is the largest part of the pre-application, and making sure that your program is within our jurisdiction. Once you are done, or if you're just working on your pre-application, you'll need to click Save Changes. Otherwise, if you've been working in there for 5 minutes, it will automatically save. But yeah, you'll scroll down and click Save Changes. Once you do that, it will refresh and another little button next to it will come up that says Mark Complete. If you click that, it'll take you back to your project page, and that's where you'll see the Submit button. When your project is done, when your pre-application is done, please click that Submit button. You are able to go back in and either view or edit your pre-application, same with your full application, until it is due. It is closed after 5 p.m. on its due date, and then you can no longer reopen it. But if you've clicked either Mark Complete or Mark Complete and Submit, either one, you can still go back and edit your application. But again, I'll say that one more time. If you do go back and edit your application before it's due, that's great, but you have to then resubmit it. So it's the green button. The reason I highlight it is because it can be kind of easy to miss because that project page will refresh and you might think, oh, I clicked Mark Complete. So please, please click Submit before that due date. And this is what it looks like after you click Submit. So you can see that you can either view or edit your application up until 5 p.m. on June 26th. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody knows you have to click Submit before 5 p.m. on June 26th. Okie doke. So that's the same for the pre-application and for the full application. So after you turn in the pre-application, if you're eligible, then you'll be welcome to start working on a full application. You can save drafts while working on these. This is everything I just said. So Mark Complete on the form. You must go back and click the green Submit. The portal closes at 5 p.m. It's very important to click Submit. Okay. All right, to review that, the pre-application review will start after pre-applications are due. You'll have up till 5 p.m. on June 26th, but please plan to turn in your pre-application and your full application early. You'll be able to edit and resubmit up until that due date. Applicants should hear by mid-August about eligibility, giving at least 8 weeks for the full application period, which as of now, we're expecting to be due at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, October 14th. And again, at the end, I'll show a timeline visual. Okay, so this is going to be an overview of the full application questions. I'm not going to go through each of them, but one tip is that the project abstract is about 3 to 4 sentences, and it's really important. The title and the abstract are one of the things that our board members and the website are often used in those areas. The board of directors are given full application materials, but sometimes they're just reminded about the project by the abstract. So the abstract and the title are 2 really important tools to tell the story of your program. So you'll do the overview section. This section is not scored. This is about the basics of the grant category and where it's located and who it serves. And then it jumps into the scored sections. So the project planning section is 35 points. This is the biggest of the scored sections. And you'll see in the guidelines that before it jumps into the questions, it shows you the scoring rubric for that section. So things like what goals it aligns with, if it provides multiple benefits, if it's ready to begin. So I will briefly show all of these for the next sections. I'm not going to read them all, but just to show you that they are in the guidelines, and anybody who's working on the application, I really recommend that they familiarize themselves with the scoring. So here's the project planning questions about the project, if it requires special permissions, the lifetime, and the readiness for implementation. Then it's the project budget. The project budget is also very important. It's 20 points and it really should align with your project planning. So there is a template. You'll need to use this template. It's an Excel template. It's on our webpage. It's in the pre-application as well as on our webpage. That will need to be filled out and uploaded into the full application section. You'll also provide a summary of that project budget. I'll show that on the next slide. A few other things about the budget. It really needs to align with your project planning. So if your project planning is all about butterflies and education about butterflies, for example, your project budget should note how that aligns. So are you requesting personnel time for the people executing that program? Great. Or supplies like butterfly nets and tools for studying butterflies. Great. That makes a lot of sense. If the budget is for things that we can't tell that it's related to your program, that might not score as well, or it might be lacking clarity, or it might seem like it's funding something totally different. That's one of the tips, is to really align the project budget and the project goals. Please note that matching funds are required for organizations with over $10 million in annual revenue. So those are large organizations. That's a 25% match requirement. And if your organization is a 501c3 nonprofit, then the maximum of indirect costs is 20% of the grant project. You can see Appendix E for more information about indirect costs. So this is a summary of that budget. This is just the wrapped up numbers. And note that there is a non-scored question about award amounts. As in the past solicitations, sometimes the board of directors have awarded partial funding to projects. So we wanted to provide them with information about how that might affect individual projects. The project goals section is 15 points. There is the scoring and then the actual questions here. The impact is worth 20 points. Climate resilience is worth 15 points. A reminder that the guidelines have a glossary and it includes a definition of climate resilience for your reference. Community engagement, stakeholder support, and community building is 20 points. Note that the guidelines state that letters of support are encouraged for this section. They can be turned in by the application due date. That way, any letters of support will be considered in the scoring of this section. If it's not turned in by the application due date, it still can be submitted up until about the time of the special board awards. But please note that if it's submitted after the application date, but before the special board meeting, the board of directors may consider that in their decision making, but it will not be reflected in the scoring. So letters of support, if you're going to use them, I recommend that you get them in time for them to be submitted in the full application, and they can take more time. So that's something to note. Underserved communities is worth 20 points. You'll need to describe how your project addresses needs for sensitive populations, and we leave that definition really up to you to define for if your community is underserved, how so, what resources are you using, or what definitions. One tool you can use is our deep engagement communities from the Open Space Authority's Understanding Our Community resource. But maybe you're serving students of Title I or using US Census Bureau data. Doesn't matter as long as you tell us what that is and if that project addresses needs for the sensitive populations. For organizational capacity, that's worth 15 points. If you are a fiscal sponsor, if you're using a fiscal sponsor for your application, the fiscal sponsor needs to define their organizational capacity, and also please touch on the organization that is using the fiscal sponsor to implement the program. So it should be both organizations talking about capacity in this category. Leadership and innovation is worth 15 points. So again, this section, it might be relevant for project partners and collaboration. So same notes about the letters of support. Once you're done with the full application, there is a checklist. So everyone is required to turn in the project budget for the full application. If you're using a fiscal sponsor, the fiscal sponsorship agreement is also required. You have the option of using letters of support, which we recommend, and other things such as photographs or maps, if it's applicable and if it helps demonstrate the story of your program, you're more than welcome to do that, but it is not required. I didn't make that note about the letters of support. If they're turned in after the application, you'll need to send that to the clerk of the board. Some overall tips and information for the solicitation. Please start early for both the pre-application and the full application. I always recommend working backwards from an early submittal date. Some parts of the application might require work from others, such as project partner letters or letters of support, so ask early for those. Read the guidelines carefully and follow all the instructions. Make sure the project deliverables and the project budget are consistent. Be detailed and direct, but concise as much as possible. Write for a broad audience that does not necessarily know the jargon of your field. If helpful, include photographs or maps or graphics, and combine similar file types. So you can put all of those things in one PDF and upload that. I always recommend that you ask someone to review your application and look for typos, spell check, etc. You may work on, you might want to work on your application answers in that Word document. And then once it's all done, copy and paste that into the software, for example. Note that our applications are made public. If you are awarded, work cannot be done outside of the grant period. So please make sure that your program does not intend to start until at least next summer of 2026. And we can't exactly control when the grant agreement will be executed. So please keep that in mind and reach out to me if you have any questions about that. All of our grants are reimbursement based. And for more tips and tricks, check out our Intro to Grants video on our website. There's lots of information there about fiscal sponsors and other writing tips and other things that are relevant for not just our grant program, but more. Our frequently asked questions document will be updated after this, so please check that out along with our other grant materials. And if you're not sure about something and you think, should I ask Jackie or not? Yeah, just ask me. If you don't remember anything after this webinar, just note that I'm here and available. Emailing me is the best way to reach me. So the eligibility and review process, just to go over this one more time, the pre-applications are reviewed for eligibility and applicants are notified. Then they'll have about 8 weeks to submit the full application. Then the full application will be scored thoroughly. It'll be reviewed thoroughly by the staff review team according to the guidelines. And then those scores are averaged for an average staff score in the board packet summary. If you are not awarded, we do offer feedback, so reach out after the special board meeting and we can set up a time to talk about your application. And here's a review of the timeline. So here we are May 28th at the workshop. Shortly after the pre-applications are due on June 26th at 5 p.m., we'll have the pre-application eligibility review period over the summer up until mid-August. Then we will start notifications for eligibility, giving 8 weeks until the full applications are due, expected October 14th. And then in the spring of 2026, we expect the special board award meetings. So here's my information.
Actually, my information just changed, so I'm gonna switch over to a different slide with my updated information. One moment. And this has my name, Jackie McBride, jmcbride@openspaceauthority.org. But my old email, jlatham, is also, it will automatically forward to my new email. So don't fear, you can reach me on either email. But moving forward, if you're a first-time emailer, jmcbride@openspaceauthority is a good place to start. A couple other things to mention. We have about a 57% average success rate for applicants. Some years lower if it's a more competitive cycle, and some years have been higher. So if that's something that's of interest to you and your chances kind of getting an award. We don't have any questions so far in the Q&A, but feel free to add any there, or we'll stay on for a little bit to allow to have live questions too. And any other questions that come in, we'll add to the Q&A. Otherwise, if that answered your questions, you're welcome to hop off. And I just want to thank everyone again for joining us. And I look forward to seeing all the applications come in. Again, you can always reach me via email. And otherwise, have a great day. But I'll hang out for a little bit. Thank you.